In our previous video, we talked about how Einstein was not so great from his childhood and how he was not a great genius. In this video, we are going to see his contributions. So basically, Einstein was introduced to higher mathematics and higher philosophy by one of his informal tutors, Max Talmy. Einstein was also introduced to a series of science books that was written by Bernstein. His full name was Aaron Bernstein. And in that, the author had imagined what would it look like when he travels on an electricity. And he also questioned himself, what would happen if we can travel on the beam of light? And that led him to write his first scientific paper, The Investigation of the State of Ether in Magnetic Field. Unfortunately, Einstein's education was disrupted by his father's repeated failure in his business, which could not take off. That led him to go to the boarding house that was in Munich, and he was also expected to complete his education there. And within 6 months, he ran back to his parents. And their parents realized that he was facing a huge amount of trouble for not completing his education. He did not have proper employable skills, and his prospects were not so promising as well. But there was a catch here. He could apply to Swiss Federal Polytechnic School, and there was no required for any kind of diploma, only if he passes his entrance examination. But when he gave his entrance examination, he only passed in mathematics and physics with a flying colors. Unfortunately, he failed at French, chemistry, and biology. But because of his exceptional mathematics and physics score, he got into that school for his higher education. After graduation in 1900, Einstein faced one of the greatest crises of his life. Because that he studied higher concepts of mathematics and physics on his own, he cut the classes often and regularly, where he could not complete his class. Because that he often cut his classes, some of the professors did not like him. Nobody gave him a letter of recommendation for his job, especially Heinrich Weber turned his request down again and again. Einstein was subsequently turned down on every position that he applied, and later Einstein writes, "I would have found a job long ago if Weber had not played dishonest game with me." His life turning point came when one of his lifelong friends' father recommended him for a clerk's job at a patent office. Marcel Grossman was able to recommend him for the position as a clerk in Swiss patent office. But unfortunately, his father died as well. But one good thing that happened was his father gave the blessings for him to marry the love of his life. While at the Polytechnic School, Einstein also had studied Maxwell's equations. Einstein discovers an unknown fact that was not even known by Maxwell, that was light speed remains constant no matter how fast one moves. This technically violates the Newton's laws of motion. There was no absolute velocity in Isaac Newton's theory. This insight led Einstein to formulate the principles of relativity. In that theory, he also says that the speed of light remains constant in any inertial frames. During 1905, which is also called as Einstein's miracle year, he published 4 papers. Later, it goes on to alter the course of modern physics. His first paper was on photoelectric effect, and he uses quantum mechanics to explain photoelectric effect. He says that light occurs in small tiny packets, and later it was called as photon. Then it should knock out an electron of a metal in a precise way, which became the photoelectric effect. And he gave a precise explanation on photoelectric effect, which led him to win the Nobel Prize. In his second paper, he gave a precise experimental proof to show the existence of atoms. In his third paper, he laid out a mathematical theory for special theory of relativity or special relativity. In his fourth paper, it was submitted as an afterthought, the equation that changed the world, the equation that showed a small mass can produce so much amount of energy. That was E equals mc squared.
It followed from the special theory of relativity that mass and energy are but different manifestations of the same thing, a somewhat unfamiliar conception for the average mind. Furthermore, the equation E is equal mc squared, in which energy is put equal to mass multiplied with the square of the velocity of light, showed that very small amount of mass may be converted into a very large amount of energy, and vice versa. The mass and energy were in fact equivalent, according to the formula mentioned above. This was demonstrated by Cockcroft and Walton in 1932 experimentally.
This equation provided the mechanism behind the energy source of sun and other stars. Einstein was not the only one who was working on theory of relativity or special theory of relativity. There were other scientists too who were also working on theory of relativity. However, Einstein is the one who assembled all the theory all together. Einstein also realized that this was a universal law of nature. In 19th century, there were two pillars of physics. One, the Newton's laws of motion, and one more, the Maxwell's theory of light. And Einstein was the only one who realized that both were contradicting and one must fall. That's when the greatest theory of gravity was come into picture, and that was the general theory of relativity. In November of 1905, Einstein finally completed his general theory of relativity. And in the same year, he gave 6 2-hour lecture on general theory of relativity in the University of Göttingen that thoroughly explained the incomplete version of general theory of relativity, which also lacked a few mathematical details. Another mathematician, David Hilbert, who organized the lectures, had also attended these lectures, and he found the incompleteness in the theory. And he absolutely took that ownership of completing the theory, and he completed the completeness of the general theory of relativity 5 days before Einstein, as if it were to be his own. But later they had their own differences, but they patched up together and they became friends. The equation which was completed by Hilbert now is also called as Einstein-Hilbert equation. The reason that Einstein name is also there is because the theory was solely developed by Einstein himself. Only the mathematical part was completed by Hilbert. Einstein was convinced that his general theory of relativity was accurate because of its mathematical beauty. And one more thing that was troubling the mathematician, astronomers, and physicists was the orbit of Mercury. It had a strange orbit, but Einstein's theory of relativity, it precisely predicted the perihelion orbit of Mercury around the Sun. His theory also predicted the measurable deflection of light around the Sun. His theory was confirmed, and they found that the space bends the light. This almost immediately made Einstein a famous figure, making him the successor to Sir Isaac Newton. And these were very few contributions that I talked about in this particular video. There was many more other contributions of his as well, which is enormously regarded as one of the most science-changing fundamental works of Einstein. So that leaves us to the question, who is the greatest of all time? Is it Einstein, who brought a new idea to the universe, or is it Newton, who gave the foundation? Newton believed that mass tells gravity how much force to exert, and Einstein believed that mass tells space-time how much to curve. Each of them have their own creativity and ideas. If you take the top 5 list of scientists of all time, the first name that always comes is Newton, Einstein, Dirac, Galileo, and Maxwell. Comparing Newton and Einstein is comparing two different worlds. Each world is beautiful in its own way. So to compare who's the greatest of all time, I would leave you audience to guess or to decide who's the greatest of all time. Leave a comment in the comment section saying who is the greatest of all time. Thank you for watching my video. For more such particular videos, please subscribe to my channel.